Okay, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Catherine Soka, and I am the co-chair of Peer Progressive East End Reformers. Peer's monthly meeting tonight, very exciting. We have the 4CD1 candidates here for a forum. We start our meetings with land acknowledgement. Peer recognizes that our members and folks that follow us are fortunate to live on the ancestral territories of the Manhasset, Montaukett Indian, and the Shinnecock nations. For those of you who are joining Peer for the first time, I'd like to share with you who Peer is. Peer is a multi-issued grassroots organization. We are committed to advocating for issues that impact all working families on Long Island. Our key issues include healthcare, housing, climate, and social justice. Peer is a chapter of the statewide organization NYPAN, New York Progressive Action Network, which was formed in 2016. So what to expect tonight? We are going to hear from the 4 declared candidates in the CD1 race. They include John Avlon, Jim Gaughran, Nancy Goroff, and Kyle Hill. Some of you may have heard that Craig Hershkowitz was a candidate for CD1. He has just earlier this week stepped aside, and he will be pursuing a run for the New York State Senate in District Number 2. So he has not gone away. He has just shifted his focus, and we may hear from him later in the spring season as we go forward with the campaigns. So tonight, we're not having a debate, just want to put that out on the table. So what will happen is that, and I must say, if this week is any indication of how the race is going to continue going forward, it's going to be busy because we had one candidate declare, one candidate undeclare, and there's already a lot of activity. And I think the buzz is really building for what should hopefully be an exciting race and then an even more exciting victory for the Democrats come November. So the format tonight is each candidate will have 20 minutes in which they can introduce themselves, they can tell us about their platform and about their plan to win. That 20 minutes will incorporate questions and answers. So, we encourage the candidates to maybe give a 10-minute introduction and allow 10 minutes for questions and answers. It's really their call. So it's a little bit like speed dating, but at the end of the evening, you're going to have a better idea of who the candidates are, what their priorities are, and how they present themselves, and which will help us all decide, who we want to maybe get behind to support in the primary, which at this point is slated for June 25. Our treasurer, Tina Jacobowitz, is going to be the timekeeper. So she will, if the candidate is still talking with 5 minutes left, she's going to give you a 5-minute warning. If we're already into Q&A at that point in time, Tina's just going to give you a 2-minute warning to let you know when your 20 minutes is about to expire. After we hear from all of the candidates, we are going to have those who would like to stay have a discussion about what we have, what we have heard this evening. So I think that pretty much covers all of it. Sorry about that. Got a second. I'm getting a healthcare call. We need, hopefully we'll talk a lot about healthcare because healthcare is one of the big priorities for Peer. I'm going to drop into the chat in just a couple of minutes how you can become a Peer member. I know a lot of people have signed up over the last month or so. Thank you. We want more people to join the organization. Joining Peer gives you the ability to vote on any particular issues that we have a membership vote. One of those issues may be who we support in the CD1 race. So if there are no further questions or comments from either Julie, who I want to give a shout out to Julie Sheehan. Julie, raise your hand. Julie was the one who really did the work to get the candidates together here this evening. So thank you for that. And Julie is also, if you have questions for the candidates, please drop them in the chat during their session. And Julie is going to call on you to, or read the question depending on what makes better sense at that point in time. Okay, so let's be respectful of the candidates and their time, and let's go ahead and we're going to start with our first candidate of the evening. I think he is here. Kyle, would you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you, Julie, for getting us all together. Thank you, everyone, for logging in tonight. It's critically important that we nominate the strongest person to go up against Nicola Lota in the fall, and you being a part of the process so early is really how we're going to do that. So I really appreciate you all for being here. So thank you. My name is Kyle Hill. I grew up in this district. I grew up in Farmingville, one of the reddest spots in this district. Currently live in Port Jefferson with my partner, Greg. I went to grad school at Stony Brook University. After school, I moved down to Washington, D.C., where I worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman Steve Israel. And that's where I became a healthcare policy expert. And there are three things that I really enjoy about working on healthcare policy. One, there's a lot to fix. Two, it's incredibly complicated. None of it makes sense. And it's a total market failure. But what does make sense is that the government would step in and give folks some help. And three, it's incredibly personal for everyone. And I was reminded how personal healthcare policy could be when in 2020, my dad had to wait in the hospital for 3 months for a lung transplant. And this was completely separate from COVID. We knew this was the trajectory of his condition. We just had no way of anticipating that a global respiratory virus would be happening at the same time. But also happening at the same time at work, one of my responsibilities was my boss at that time was the Congressional Kidney Caucus co-chair. And we did a lot of work on organ transplant policy. And at that time, we were rallying congressional support to update the organ transplant policy system because the system as it existed was failing patients. I knew the numbers. I knew the statistics on the numbers of patients that were dying waiting for an organ. And now I was faced with the grim reality that my dad could be a part of those numbers. And it all worked out. He is doing great. If you saw him today, you would never know that anything happened. Thank you. But that experience is what brought me back home to Long Island. I knew it was time to be close to family again. And since coming back, I've been getting involved with the Brookhaven Democratic Committee as much as possible. I've also joined Port Jeff EMS as a volunteer EMT. I don't know if you caught on News 12 this morning, the fire in Port Jeff was my shift this morning, and I am, like 4 feet away from the News 12 camera that we saw, and and actually a firefighter got hurt and we had to treat them. But so that's what I've been doing since I've been getting back. And now that I'm in New York again, I look at Congress from afar and I am frustrated every single day with the never-ending dysfunction. And I'm sure you share in that frustration. And it is always something with these folks, whether it is the speaker debacle or the George Santos saga or the second speaker debacle. It is truly never ending. And, this Congress of chaos, they have not even passed a budget. And we are now a little more than a week away from another possible government shutdown. And this is supposed to be the most basic of responsibilities, to pass a budget. And if they can't do the basics, how the hell can we expect them to do the hard stuff? Like addressing climate change or the affordability crisis that's happening right here on Long Island, or even the wonky things like organ transplant policy. And the answer is we can't. And while this Congress is chaos nonstop, we cannot ignore how radical these folks have become. And every single day that Nick Lota is in office, he enables the most extreme elements of his party to hijack our government. I was there when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And I watched as Republican members of Congress cheered on as the right to an abortion, a right that women had fought for generations, was taken away in an afternoon. And I was also there on January 6th. And what haunts me most about that day still is that after hours of sheltering in place and hours of violence and the Capitol desecrated, still 139 House Republicans voted no to certify the 2020 election. And that's why we have to make sure that Nick LaLota is a one-term congressman. And that's why I'm running for this job. We have to flip this seat. We have to deliver a Democratic majority, and we have to protect our democracy and get Congress working again for everyday Long Islanders. I don't want to take up too much more time of me speaking. I really want to hear what your questions are. I know part of the prompt that Julie shared with us was, how we're going to win and what committees we want to serve on. I think those are very important questions. How we're going to win. This is a tricky district. Absolutely. I think it's critically important that we have a candidate that can unite all stakeholders that are good, or even in the realm of possibility of voting for a Democrat. That means appealing to, the most progressive person in Suffolk County and the unaffiliated voter in this county who thinks all politicians and all parties are the worst. This is we're about a third Democratic, a third unaffiliated, and a little bit less than a third Republican. So we can't do it all by ourselves. We're going to have some cross-partisan appeal, certainly. And that's why we have to make sure that we pick someone that can do that. And then, to answer your question, what committees we want to serve on, I'm a policy person. I would be one of those people that would be on every committee if I could. But you don't have a staff that big, so that's not an option. You don't have that many hours in the day. But if I were lucky enough to get this job and you're all lucky enough to put me up for it, or if I was lucky enough for you all to put me up for it, I would ask to be on transportation and infrastructure. I think, suburban policy is sometimes really missing in terms of how we think about transportation policy on the federal level. There's lots of dollars out there for cities that have public transportation. We don't see enough of increasing public transportation, for places like out in Suffolk County, where there's just not the options to really make it feasible to work. There was a story in Newsday, probably sometime this summer, where it takes people without cars sometimes 2 hours, 2-3 hours to get to their jobs. And if the bus isn't running on time, or if they miss it because the connection wasn't running on time, they can't even get to work that day. So it's, I think we really need folks in there that have a different perspective, that can really bring in policies that would hopefully help out communities like ours. And then the other committee that I would want to be on, usually get to as a freshman, is the agriculture committee. There's a lot of good things. This is an agriculture district. This is a critical part of our economy. It's also critical, it's not just agriculture, but also agritourism is so important for our economy, and it's growing. And this is, how we create opportunity out here. And having someone from New York, representing on that community, on that committee, I think is just really important to have that perspective. And then also my very first brief career, I was a registered dietitian. I went to Stony Brook, and that's where I trained to do that, and worked at a number of healthcare facilities in my training in Suffolk County. So I have a very special place in my heart for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, used to be called food stamps. The Agriculture Committee actually has jurisdiction over that program. And I think there's, a lot of ideas that we can do to that program to make it more innovative, to hopefully, obviously, of course, I think we need to increase the benefit. There's no way SNAP can get you through an entire month if that's what you're depending on. But we can be innovative in terms of, making sure that we expand access to things like farmers markets, and making sure that folks are getting healthier food. I think, just general health, making everyone a little bit healthier lowers healthcare costs. Obviously, people just should want to be healthier in general. And, truthfully, one of the hardest things to do in Congress is not to solve the problem, but it's to pay for the solution. That is what we actually really fight over the most. And that is why healthcare has been such a tough nut to crack, is because it is so expensive. And part of the reason why it is so expensive is because, we're just, as a society, not as healthy as we could be. And there are certainly, food policies, and including in the SNAP program, that we can do to, just help encourage people and make it easier for folks to be healthier. And that would hopefully lower costs and make other parts of the healthcare policy conundrum easier to solve down the line. So I think that covers all the prompts. I'd love to get, as many questions in as we can before my time is up. Again, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Great, thank you. And Catherine Soka has a question.
Yeah, just picking up on what you had to say, Kyle, about appealing to a number of voters in the district, both for the primary and, of course, for the crucial election in November. Specifically, how do you plan to encourage, to reach independent voters and low turnout voters to go to the polls and vote for you?
Yeah, so I think those are possibly two separate. Well, actually, no. I would say for in this election, every election is probably going to be different, right? There's going to be overarching themes that are always going to be there, overarching issues, whether it be local or national, that are probably always going to be part of the calculus. In this one, especially, an issue that can appeal to unaffiliated voters and folks who might be inclined to stay home, or not counting down the days to get to early voting on that first morning, is absolutely reproductive freedom. We have seen every few weeks consistently, there is another horror story, whether it is out of Texas, where a woman can't get an abortion for an unviable fetus and is forced to give birth, or just yesterday with the insanity over IVF treatment in Alabama. And I'll share, my own personal kind of connection to that. As a LGBT person, obviously, if I were to choose to have children, IVF would have to be a route that I would have to go down, if not adoption. So that's always something that's in the back of my mind. And in a more personal capacity, my parents struggled with fertility. 1 in 6 couples struggle with fertility. My parents they ended up using artificial insemination for me and my sister. But if that failed, the next step was IVF. And I think it's really important that continues to be an option for folks. And the other professional connection that I have to this, one of the privileges that I had working on Capitol Hill, my last boss, she was part of the pro-choice caucus, and she was part of the executive committee of that caucus. And the executive committee was kind of spun out. You may remember when the Republicans were in charge, not this time, but the time before that. And they went kind of crazy over investigating Planned Parenthood. After the Planned Parenthood investigation select committee, they decided to give people like their portfolio on what that member would focus on. And my boss was focused on the science part of abortion. So we did we focused on things like stem cell therapy, where the Republicans are completely on the crazy end of the spectrum when it comes to what most Americans want on this subject, and things like IVF. So they have been working toward taking away these things for a very long time, and they will continue to do it. We cannot hesitate for one moment to remind folks that they will continue to take this as far as they possibly can every time they have power. And where I think that leads to is a national abortion ban.
Great, thanks. And Francesca had a question, which now has vanished from the chat, about supporting the moratorium on LNG facilities and ending new fossil fuel infrastructure and drilling for oil and gas, and I think we're coming up on bumping up against the time limits here. So
yeah, so I think this is certainly complicated, right? And I think we're going to need a transition period to move to fully renewable energies. And the faster we can get through that period, I think the better for everyone. Of course, we want to make sure that we have domestic energy production, one, for national security purposes, two, for climate change, and three, for health. I'm a healthcare person, so I'll always kind of, end up there eventually. One of the things that I think is really lacking in all this conversation on fossil fuels, which affects people directly every day, is, every time, combustion engines, the exhaust from it is essentially poison in the air. It is air pollution. And we do not talk about that enough. One of the fantastic, amazing benefits about electric vehicles is there is not exhaust from that. It's not, there's certainly other environmental concerns and how you get the batteries and the minerals and all that. But a huge benefit is just having cleaner air, healthier folks. Like I said, asthma is a huge issue, especially in communities of color, especially in the Medicaid program. And a lot of that has to do with the environmental factors around them, from industrial pollution and like proximity to highways. It's all tied together eventually. But yes, we have to, I hope I answered that as best I could. We have to move through the transition period as fast as possible and use federal government incentives to get us there.
great. And we're going to try to squeeze two more questions
Okay,
in.
lightning round.
One
then.
very briefly, would you support the Medicare for All bill, the Jayapal bill in the House?
As written, it is not a bill that I would want to support. And there's a really specific reason why. They sunset the value-based care programs in that program, in that legislation. And I'll try to go fast. Value-based care is a way to align incentives between the payers, which in this case is the government, and the providers. One of the biggest problems in our healthcare system is that you go to the doctor, they get paid for what they did. There is no determining whether it worked. We don't know if you needed it in the first place. It's like when you get your third, fifth, fourth, fifth CAT scan, right? And they could have just referred to the one that they took in the beginning. Value-based care makes it so that the physician or the provider has an incentive to keep your costs down. But if there's two ways to keep costs down. You keep people healthier, or you skimp on care. If you skimp on care, you get in trouble, and then no one wants to be out of the Medicare program. And it's all volunteer right now, so there's not the incentive to really go that route. They sunset those programs. I think that's a huge mistake. I think we have to get in that direction where we're making folks healthier. We're not just covering them. So that's my major issue with Medicare for All as that specific bill.
Got it. And the last question is from William Stieglitz. What would you do to protect the lives and dignity of our LGBTQ youth, especially because today Nassau County Exec Blakeman announced a ban on transgender and non-binary athletes from competing in girls' sports?
Yeah, this is recorded, so I will try to not use language that I wouldn't want on a recorded meeting. But my political awakening, there were two things happening. One, the Iraq War, and two, the marriage equality debate. And I got you 2 minutes. So it hurt a lot when the state legislature failed to pass marriage equality. And I think they took 3 votes on it before it ultimately happened. And I think there's nothing that pisses me off more than these right-wing politicians going after trans kids. It's disgusting. They are the most vulnerable among us. They are also the tiniest population. Like, it is so few how many folks fall into this category. And it is so difficult. I struggled to come to my own realization being an LGBT person. I can't imagine how much harder it has to be to not only realize that you're different, but even your own body is you feel is not right for you. That has to be a whole other thing that is truly unimaginable. And it's horrible. But what we should do is there's bullying legislation in Congress right now that I would co-sponsor as the day it's introduced. And we have to make sure that we use the power of the federal government. The federal government funds our schools not largely, but there is federal dollars that go to our schools. We need to make sure that there are anti-bullying policies if schools want to continue to get federal funds. And we have to hold schools accountable to make sure that they are not just passing policies that are unenforced.
Great. Thank you so much. You spoke succinctly and you crammed a bunch of questions in there. I'm thrilled and really appreciate your taking the time. You're excused.
Well, hang
and
on
we're
just 1 second
Oh,
for that, because first of all, I'm not sure, is Jim Gaughran in the room? Because he's our next person, and so until Jim comes, maybe we have a minute or two here with Kyle. Yeah, I just want to follow up with what you just said, Kyle. I really appreciate your straightforward answer to William's question. And if the Marriage Equality Act was put before us today in Congress, it probably wouldn't pass. And that goes to your point of how important it is to have a Democrat represent us in CD1, come November, because the rights of many peoples are being taken, and in particular, those who are in the trans community. So thank you for putting that out there. And I'm going to ask Julie if she could maybe contact Jim and see where he is. But in this,
well, you and Nancy Goroff is here, so maybe we can proceed apace.
okay,
with
we can do
Nancy
a switch if Nancy.
if that's
Why don't we
amenable
do
to
that?
her.
And if you could, maybe you can contact Jim and let him
Yeah,
know.
I'll do that.
Okay, Kyle, thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. I put my website in the chat if you all want to sign up for emails, follow along. I'd love to have you all. Thank you. And good evening, Nancy.
Thanks again. Be
Good
well,
to see you, Kyle, as always.
Okay, Nancy, you're on. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, happy to go early. That's terrific. I want to say thank you to you, Catherine, for all you've done with Peer over so many years. And Julie, thank you for putting this group together tonight. And thank you all for taking the time this is like an endurance test for you to go through 4 candidates in a row. But see many people I've worked with for many years on this call, and it's great to see you all. And I look forward to answering your questions. So I think many of you know me as the scientist who ran against Lee Zeldin in 2020. So I thought I would really focus in this part, and I want to make sure I do leave plenty of time for questions, that I would focus on what I've been doing since then and why I'm running. We all were witness to the attacks on our democracy January 6th in 2021. Locally here in the school district next to mine, in May of 2021 in Smithtown, we had 3 right-wing extremists who were elected to the school board. And at that point, a group of us came together and formed a new organization called the Long Island Strong Schools Alliance, or LISA. Our goal is to make sure that our public schools are supported and that every child feels a sense of belonging in their school. And so we have been working on educating the public, also gathering information about what different school districts are doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. We have published a report about that. And we have a nonpartisan political action committee to get good people elected to school board. I have personally been mentoring candidates, dozens of candidates in the last 2 years to help them get elected, and very proud of that work. I see many friends of LISA on this call, so thank you. You all know who you are, and thank you for your work on behalf of LISA and on behalf of our kids. I feel at this point, we have really made a lot of progress, and we see a shift in the narrative of what's happening in our schools. But at the national level, we are seeing that our democracy is as much under threat as ever with the craziness going on in Congress. And so I decided that it was time to turn my attention again to the national and run for Congress, because we deserve so much better. The people of this district deserve so much better than Nick LaLota. I am running so that I can protect our kids from gun violence and bullying, protect our environment from the extreme effects of climate change and from threats to our clean water, and protect our democracy, including women's bodily freedom. And I am running to build an economy that works for everybody. In order to actually do those things and give people the representation they deserve, we need to flip this seat. And that means out raising, out communicating, and out organizing Nick LaLota. To do that, we need to have a really strong team. And I am thrilled that one of my favorite things to do in the world is to build teams. It's what I did at the university in my research lab. It's what I did in the university in my leadership roles, tackling difficult political problems at the university level. And it's what we've done with LISA and what we have started to do with our campaign. So we already have the campaign up and running. My campaign manager, Maggie Touchton, is on this call, and I think my organizing director may also be here, Emily Fernandez. We have already 5 staff members. Our office opening will be March 2nd in Setauket. We are working hard and having fun and would love to have all of you as part of the team. And so I'm going to stop there so that I can answer your questions and look forward to this discussion. Thanks so much.
Great. We have a question from Jerry, which it's a familiar question, Nancy. It's how are you going to encourage independent voters and low turnout voters to vote and support you?
Yeah, I think people vote. Thank you. And it's familiar not only because I got to see it at the beginning of the session, but because this is a question that gets asked every time I meet with people, right? How are we going to flip this seat? The way we flip the seat is by getting the most votes, and that means turning people out. So that means exciting them, making them believe that this election matters and who they elect matters. They need to believe that the person they're electing understands them, understands their connection, their community and their community problems. And I will be focusing on making sure that voters know my story, know how connected I am here. You know, Suffolk County is my home. It's where I raised my kids. It's where I built my career. They know that I'm committed. Also, for younger voters, I have a very strong record on climate change and working on climate change as a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists and in my own research. I think these are the sorts of things that can get people excited. My background as an educator also can get people excited. And by having a really strong team where we make sure that our volunteers are bringing in their friends to volunteer and so on, we will make sure that people are hearing from people they trust about why this election matters.
Great, thank you. Just to follow up on that, could you talk a little bit, this is a question from EJ Lopez, about how you're going to do things this time differently from the last time, where you also had a longstanding interest in climate science and background as an educator,
Sure.
etc.
Sure. So last time, thank you, EJ. Good to see you as always. Last time we got everybody out to vote on both sides, right? We had record turnout in 2020. What we need to do this time is make sure we continue to get people as enthusiastic on the Democratic side as they were then. We have a better district than we had then. We don't know the final lines yet, but hopefully it will not get any worse than it is now, and it's 4.5% better. But we also need to make sure that people know who I am as a complete person. I do believe people vote and choose their candidates based on who they trust and who they feel represents their values. To make sure that people understand who I am, I think we need to tell my story more completely than we maybe did last time. And we are working now to think about which parts of my story really bring out my values in a way that people can relate to. You know, my parents were small business owners. I want to make sure that people understand my commitment to both small businesses and workers. I want to make sure they know about the work I've done in the community, both with LISA and with nonprofits in the community that I've worked on and worked with for years. So we will make sure that we're telling the story in a more three-dimensional way. Yes, I'm a scientist, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a scientist, and I think it brings unique skills. I'm also a team builder. I'm also really grounded in the community, and I want to make sure people get those messages as well.
Great. And I missed the first question to you in the chat. I'm so sorry. It's from Catherine Levy. If elected, another familiar one, would you support Jayapal's Medicare for All bill? If not, why not? Please be specific.
Absolutely. I completely support the goals. Every person deserves access to affordable, high-quality healthcare. At this point, after talking to many experts, I don't believe that the Medicare for All bill is going to be the most effective way to get there. And that's because of logistical challenges and political challenges. So, for example, among logistical challenges, the fact that we would be moving people from Medicaid to Medicare, but Medicaid covers many things besides healthcare. It covers long-term care in nursing homes. It covers transportation and a huge host of things. And so there are logistical challenges. There's the obvious political challenge of misdirection on the part of Republicans saying, oh, well, small businesses will have to have a certain kind of healthcare and so on. But there's also a real challenge for labor. Many unions have negotiated away salary for healthcare benefits, and they are opposed to anything that makes a sudden change that makes those negotiated benefits useless to their members. And so those are serious obstacles. If we were starting from scratch, Medicare for All would be a very reasonable approach. We're not starting from scratch. We're starting from the world we live in. And so what I would support is lowering the age for Medicare so that more people have direct access to it, and making Medicare available as a public option in our current system. So those are the policies that I support at this point.
If I could just jump in, Nancy, you're mentioning lowering the age. What age would you put out there?
I would love to see us over time move to 50 years old, which would take care of the vast majority of high-cost healthcare. And I don't know over what time period that would be, but whatever we could manage as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up to the union issue, which, we understand because the New York State has the New York Health Act that we've been working on for several years, and the unions, many of them are coming around. So I think that's a possible. There's possible movement on that score. Anyway, I'll step back.
Great.
All right, you're stepping back, and Jerry, you're stepping in. You have a question. If you want to unmute yourself, please.
Okay, hi. Nancy, we just had a successful election in CD3. And as we look at that, or as you look at that, and I think you've probably been watching that very closely or did, what would you take from that? What do you think Mr. Swazi did successfully? What would you borrow from that? Well, how does that apply to our district? Or is it a different district and it's, you can't compare? Anything you'd like to say about that?
Jerry, thank you for that. I think there's some really important messages, especially for a group like this. We know how hard activists worked for that election, right? People across Long Island and across the country came together behind Tom Swazi and worked hard to get the voter turnout that led to him having such a strong win. The other piece that I would point to is how well he worked with labor and how much he put labor front and center in his efforts. And they came out for him, they knocked on doors in a big way. And I think both of those things are lessons. We need to be careful about drawing any conclusions too much from a special election to November. But, you know, with the Republican machine in Nassau County, which is not all that different from the Republican machine in Suffolk County, I think they would have been given the edge on organizing and turning people out for a special election. In a presidential year, we have that much more going for us in getting people out. And so we are energized by this. We see that our supporters are energized, and we think this is going to be the year that we flip Long Island blue.
Thank you.
Let's do it. Tony Black has a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it about LIPA?
Sure. Nancy, I know that you've been really intimately involved with the concerns of LIPA, and I know that you have expressed strong feelings that LIPA should be a municipally run, I can't say the word right now, run entity, rather than us paying all this money for the oversight. And I'm wondering, I know you've done a lot on that locally, but from Congress, what can be done? How can being in Congress help move that forward?
Judy, thank you for that. I was proud to be a LIPA trustee. For those of you who thought LIPA maybe ceased to exist in 2012 or 2013, the Long Island Power Authority still owns our grids. It's a New York State authority, and it is required by current law to contract with a third-party service provider, which is now PSEG Long Island. But there has been a movement really championed by Assemblyman Fred Thiel to figure out a way to make the Long Island Power Authority a fully public utility. The advantage of that is that you are not paying a management fee, which is essentially just the straight profit part of what is currently $80 million to PSEG Long Island every year. And that's money that instead could be invested in clean energy and in improving our infrastructure in energy and lowering costs for ratepayers, right? And so fundamentally, this is about providing better quality energy to the ratepayers of LIPA, which includes Nassau and Suffolk County, as well as the Far Rockaways, while also saving people money. And unfortunately, Judy, I think this is really something that has to be done at the state level. However, I'm a big believer that no matter what office you're elected to, your job is to help connect people with every level of government and help drive discussion. And so as a member of Congress, I would certainly want to help communicate with people about the benefits of public power and the disadvantages of our current system, and make sure that we are really considering what is best for the ratepayers at all times.
Thank you.
So our timekeeper, she's probably going to give you a 2-minute warning, along with asking a question about immigration reform. Sigrid, you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what is your thinking on immigration reform? And also, what did you think of the attempt at bipartisan resolution recently in the last couple of weeks?
Thank you for that. Immigration is a serious issue. It is obviously one that Nick LaLota has chosen to run on. it is also a serious issue for the people of our communities, especially the communities that are facing significant financial drain because of immigrants who are coming in who need support. We are a country of immigrants, and I believe very strongly that we need people to come into our country. At the same time, I think we are not serving anybody very well right now because of the huge backlog and how long it takes for people to be considered for asylum when they make an asylum request. We need to have more financial resources for more judges so that cases get adjudicated more quickly. We need to get people into the system faster so that they are legal to work as soon as possible while they're waiting for their case to be adjudicated. And so they're not a burden on taxpayers. We also need to address the fundamental reasons why people are coming to this country from Central and South America, which largely have to do with climate change and you know, a lot of climate caused dislocations in terms of farming. So we need to help those economies diversify so that people have ways to support their families without coming to this country, without walking miles and miles across Central America and Mexico. I think the bipartisan legislation was negotiated in good faith by both sides, and both sides had things that they gave up as a result. Obviously, we need to get a path to citizenship for the Dreamers, for example. But if you look at what Nick Lolota did, he's not actually interested in solving this problem. He announced he was against the bipartisan legislation before he even knew what was in it. He wants to use this for political points, not to actually solve the problem. If he was serious about solving it, he would have gotten behind that bipartisan legislation, which was a compromise all around, but it would have brought needed resources to address the issue. And instead, he listened to Donald Trump and followed Donald Trump's bidding.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
And Jim is here, unmuted, I believe. Unmuting, camera coming on.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I did come on at 6:30, and then I saw Nancy, and I got the text to come back, but I figured I'd leave the link up, but I was not paying attention because I figured I didn't need to pay attention to Nancy. Let her have her talk, and I'm happy to be here and chat. Okay. I mean, what is the format? You want me to just introduce myself a little, and can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Jim, we can hear you. This is Catherine
Oh,
Soka
okay.
here. If you don't
Oh.
mind, please introduce yourself and what we would like
Sure.
to hear. You have 20 minutes. You know, we would like to hear your priorities for your campaign, how you
Sure.
envision winning, and then we want to leave at least 10 minutes, maybe, if not more, for questions and answers. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And some of you may know I had some health issues that I was dealing with, had a couple of procedures in January. So I have fortunately missed some of the forums and events, but I am back. I'm on the mend, and I'm, you know, very much engaged and looking forward to this campaign. I tell you a little bit about myself. I've lived on Long Island my entire life. My wife, Carol, who is a library media specialist teacher at Patchogue Medford, and I live in Northport, where we raised two great kids who are no longer kids, and they're you know, out on their own, one in California, one in Washington, D.C., and we're very proud of them. Professionally, I have spent my career as an attorney. I chose a long time ago to have my own private practice, a sole practitioner. so that I could pick and choose clients, and that has worked well for me. But I think it also has given me, I believe, a lot of insight into what's, Long Island families and families across this country struggle with. I've represented clients in a variety of areas, families, individuals, small companies, larger corporations. I've been involved in environmental issues and a whole bunch of things as an attorney for about 33 years. I have been fortunate for 14 years. I had was in elected public office when I was 26 at the town. In the town of Huntington, I was elected councilman. I was actually the youngest member of the town board ever elected. I then served 3 terms in the Suffolk County Legislature. When I was in local office there, I was involved in a variety of issues. The town, I was the fiscal watchdog because I was the only Democrat. I wrote the first ethics law for any town in the state. Aging myself, I actually wrote the first recycling law for the town of Huntington because everything was going right into the waste stream. As county legislator, I was involved in reforming the police department when I was first elected. I came into the county, and the police department had major problems with corruption. The State Investigation Commission came on board and pointed to a lot of issues. So I chaired the Public Safety Committee. We brought in a reform police commissioner who had actually been the commissioner in Boston. We brought in community policing. We made all sorts of changes that I believe were for the better. I also worked with both Fred Thiel and Steve Engelbright, and the 3 of us wrote the laws that basically purchased all of the Pine Barrens and other critical watershed areas because we figured out how we could bond money back then using sales tax in the future. And in effect, Pine Barrens and everything that's been purchased since was a result of that legislation. I also chaired the Suffolk County Water Authority, where I was involved in, again, improving its administration, also bringing in better environmental standards. For 4 years, I served in the New York State Senate. I was elected in 2018. I defeated a Republican incumbent who had been there for 24 years, and a district, half of which never had a Democratic senator, and the other one had a Democratic senator going back to last time was 1948. And I was immediately put in, and Andrea Stewart Cousins, I was proud to vote for it seems kind of odd, but the first female leader of a legislative body. It took us to 2019 to actually accomplish that. But she gave me a major committee, local government committee, and she gave me the opportunity, because I believe of my experience, to be involved in writing some of the major legislation that we were able to pass. So I co-sponsored gun safety laws, including red flag laws, safe storage. One of the first bills I voted for was to codify Roe v. Wade. And I just want to step a second back on that to explain that, because my experience with these issues, I believe, puts me in the best position to run in the fall, because I'm going to run on my record and I'm going to go to Washington, and I believe be able to immediately work on trying to implement some of these issues at the federal level. When I voted to codify Roe v. Wade, I was criticized throughout my district. A Catholic priest had me actually banned from marching in the Huntington St. Patrick's Day parade, where I was once the Grand Marshal, which, yeah, it personally, stinged. But, I see a lot of, good candidates, Democratic elected officials, when they see the fire coming at them, almost like deers in the headlights. Well, that wasn't me. I jumped right in. I talked about John F. Kennedy and separation of church and state, and how I took an oath to a constitution, and I fought back. And in 2020, I was able to win a rather tough re-election campaign where millions and millions of dollars were spent against me. So I believe I've got the record to win. I believe I know how to move forward and fight the Republicans because they're going to be right at us with all the nonsense. And I actually believe the Swazi race kind of shows that voters are looking for somebody who has a record, has experience, but also has a vision for what we need to do for this country. And I'm sure, and I'm sure we can discuss some of that in questions, but I'm ready to take on the load and do my part to winning back our country. So I'm
Excellent.
happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I see a first question in the chat is from Francesca. Do you want to unmute and ask it yourself, Francesca?
Oh, sure. I'll even put on my camera.
Hi,
So-
Francesca.
Hi, Jim. I'm the chair of the Long Island Climate Reality Project chapter, and we are extremely concerned that it seems that there is a flagging commitment to making as swift a transition as possible to clean energy. And, Joe Biden has given with one hand and taken away with the other.
Right.
Now, one of the things that he's given with one hand was the moratorium on LNG, but it's just a moratorium. We don't know if it's a permanent one. And what he has taken away is he opened up the Willow Project. He green-lighted the Mountain Valley Pipeline. We need to stop building new gas and oil infrastructure, stop digging the hole in the ground that is really going to destroy our future. So I want to know, would you support ending all new fossil fuel infrastructure, new drilling for oil and gas, and make the moratorium on LNG permanent?
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. I worked with Senator Todd Kaminsky to write our climate law in New York State, which, as you know, set a variety of goals to move us to renewables and off of fossil fuels. And it was negotiated. We had to do a lot to get it through the legislature. But one of the things it has accomplished, which I think is important, is that it has said to the fossil fuel industry, New York State is real. These are the goals. These are what the state is going to do, and it has pretty much stopped most new investment in fossil fuels in New York State. So I believe we do need to stop new investment and move towards renewable energy. I believe it is something that could also help spike some economic growth, including here on Long Island. But we also have to make sure that while we're doing that, we're also providing the funding and the infrastructure to make sure that we still have the lights on. I'll give you an example. Electric automobiles. They are the future, but there are two problems with them right now. They're too expensive, and most people can't afford them. And Americans like to get in their car and drive, and we need to build out the infrastructure. And building out the infrastructure is something that I was working on in the Senate, but I think we really need to do it in a major way across the country. And I only mention that as just one of the challenges that we have. I think as Democrats, we can't just say we want to stop fossil fuels. We have to provide the funding, the tax incentives, and the leadership, quite frankly, to make sure that as we're transitioning, we're not turning the lights out. And when I ran the water authority, we were one of the largest users, particularly in the summer. It was us and the MTA in terms of power, and we saved a lot of money because we had our tanks fill up in the evening hours where we got a discount on that, and that helped us because they were, it wasn't their peak period. Well, you're no longer going to have a non-peak period because everybody's going to be charging their automobiles at night. So these are issues we have to talk about, we have to be honest about, we have to get advice on, and we need to move forward.
Just very quickly, just say, studies have shown that we've got the electrical grid capacity at least through 2030, and by then we will have built a lot more, certainly on Long Island, to go electric. And I just have to say that, yes, we do need to build out the infrastructure and we need the support to do that. But wind and solar are, certainly solar and wind are cheaper now than gas.
Absolutely.
So, you know, when it comes to the costs are far greater for oil and gas to our
Right.
community.
And let me tell you, one of the battles I had with the head of the MTA is electrifying the Long Island Railroad, all the way out to Port Jefferson and on Port Jefferson line, and all the way out to the East End on the other lines. We still have these diesel guzzling trains. And at one hearing, I really took him to task because he was talking, about, well, it's not really a priority and all the expenses. Well, one of the things we have to do in Washington, and there's plenty of infrastructure money that's there, and Lolota is doing nothing at all to bring back the money that we are paying for, that Biden got in the infrastructure bill. And one of my priorities is going to be, among others, is to fight so that we can get part of that infrastructure money so that we can immediately work on electrifying the Long Island Railroad, from Manhattan to the tip of Long Island. And it's infrastructure not just for the tracks and for the trains, but also there's going to have to be some land taking and dealing with some environmental issues in parts of in parts of the system. But we can do that, and we need to get the money to the state so that we can in effect force them to move.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next question is a chestnut for us. We're asking every candidate this. If elected, would you vote for Jayapal's Medicare for All bill? If you feel it has flaws, would you work with her
Right.
and others to improve it?
Right. Well, if it has the votes to pass in the House, I will be supportive of it. Honestly, I do believe that it's going to be very difficult to pass, and that and our focus really is probably going to have to be, what are we going to do to fix our medical systems so that we're providing more and more coverage to everybody in other ways. One of the things that we need to do is, who are the people that are uninsured? It is, if you're on Medicaid, you have insurance. If you're employed, you have insurance. You have insurance often through your unions. But there are two big groups. There are others that we need to figure out how to cover. One is I don't even want to say the working poor, the working middle class, who don't qualify for Medicaid because they make too much money, but they're not able to get a decent health care plan or afford the Affordable Care Act. So I think we need to give subsidies to the state to sort of bump up Medicaid so that more Medicaid type benefits, so that more people will be able to qualify for it. The other group of people is what I call the young invincibles, mostly young people who can afford health insurance, but do not get it because nothing is ever going to happen to them. And then they end up going to the hospital and getting some huge bill. And I think a lot of this has to be coordinated with the state. But one thing that could be done is that you get one shot. If you're in a hospital and you have a catastrophic issue, you're automatically put onto Obamacare. Those costs are waived for you, but in the future, you're going to be forced to start paying for it. There are other gaps, but of course, we got to go after prescription drugs and regulate them. As Biden has started with insulin.
Great. Any other questions? Lisa, you've been very active in the chat, and I wonder if you have a question for the candidate.
I'm sorry, Lisa, I haven't seen any of your questions. So.
I guess not.
Nope.
Jim, if I could just step in, sorry, Julie, the issue about Medicare for All or the New York Health Act, and you just enumerated the different segments of the population and how each of them has to deal with it. I would just push back a little bit and say that most of the people in the middle class, even if they get some insurance from their employers, are still paying a large amount every month to have health care for their family. And so much of the current system gives so much to the insurance companies in the way of, they just skim off the top and they're taking a lot of profit. So I guess I would like to say that I would like whoever represents us going to Washington to really work with Jayapal to try to figure out how we can actually make that, that bill better so that we can actually provide Medicare for all for all people. So I'm just.
I think we have to get the support for it too. And one of the big issues is, of course, the unions. You've got to get the unions on board.
No, I understand that. And as we mentioned before, when we were talking with Nancy, I mean, we've been dealing with this with the New York Health Act for many decades here in the state, and we're making real progress with the unions here, but we need to continue to work with them.
Right.
But I mean, I guess what we would love to hear you say is that you would be a leader when you go to Washington on this and try to figure out a way, have the vision. You talked about vision earlier, have that
Right.
vision for a way to give something which should be almost a right to every
Right.
American in the the wealthiest
Well,
country.
it will be a major goal of mine to try to make sure we can get everybody insured.
Fantastic, thank you.
We have 2 minutes left.
And Lisa is having technical difficulties, but she has a question, which is, what do you see as the biggest issues right now for women?
Especially older women, if I might add, over 50.
Okay, well, I think for all women, the huge issue, of course, is codifying Roe v. Wade. We have to codify Roe v. Wade at the national level because if Trump gets in, or even if he doesn't, some future Congress and future Republican president, that's going to be taken away from women across this country. I think pay equity is something that has to be done. We have to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Is something that I think absolutely has to be done. I think we have to. You're talking about healthcare and environmental issues. We need to do a lot more at the federal level. I think to figure out what are we doing to try to come up with a way to finally cure breast cancer, which, as you know, is a huge problem on Long Island. Bigger than in many other parts of the country. Amongst many of the other things that I know we need to do.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
And then we have another question when you're done.
Mr. Gaughran, I would appreciate it if I specifically ask about women over 50. That's what I'm interested in, but thank you for your time.
Okay, well, I think women over 50, we have to make sure, again, that they have equal rights. Women over 50 are still in the workforce, many folks, and so we have to make sure that women over 50 have equal pay for equal work. I think we have to do a lot more towards making sure in government, including the federal government, that there are more opportunities for women all women, but women over 50, who I think often are left behind in many of the higher policy positions in government.
Time is up.
Oh, sorry, Jerry.
It's
All
okay.
right, thank you so much, Jim. Take it away, Kat.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jim. We appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. I would love
Okay.
to have everyone's support. Thanks.
Thank you. Drop your website in the chat if you'd like. So now we're going to go to John Avlon. I think he's here. So John, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
How are y'all? I'm John Avlon. I'm the newest entrant to this race. I joined just yesterday morning, and it's been a great kickoff to the campaign. And I'm looking forward to talking to you all. I'm a former CNN analyst and anchor, journalist for a long time, editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast, author of 4 books, including Wingnuts, The Lunatic Fringe is Hijacking America. And I love to talk policy and solutions for government, not just our problems. So I look forward to talking to y'all.
So John, before we have some questions, do you want to just tell us what your priorities are in the race? You know, what you're going to focus on and how you envision winning?
Sure. Look, I think I believe deeply that this election is the most important of our lifetimes, not for the usual reasons of America being at a crossroads, which every election is. But we've never had a candidate, a major party candidate in American history, campaign on an authoritarian platform, praising dictators at every stop, and who already tried to overturn democracy and overturn an election on the back of a lie. And just frankly, just in a sinister way, is now enforcing that election lie as a litmus test for party loyalty. It's incredibly dangerous to our democracy. I'm the grandson of immigrants. My family came here and always communicated the idea and the belief, which I share, that, you know, America, we can't take our democracy for granted. We can't take the blessings of America for granted. It's up to citizens to stand up and really push back on those changes. The blessing and to some views, maybe the curse of living in a democratic republic, is that it's up to us. We, the citizens, we, the people, need to stand up and take responsibility for our country. And this is the opportunity and the obligation of this election. I think everyone needs to roll up their sleeves and get off the sidelines and understand there's one functioning political party in this country right now. It's the Democratic Party. And it's a big tent party, and that's healthy. You know, we need, you know, it takes both wings to fly. And I think the more we can focus on solutions and defeating this threat to our country, and then finding ways to reunite as a nation, is incredibly important. And I think rediscovering the best traditions of progressivism, which is building broad coalitions and focusing on solutions and connecting it to our ideals as a country. Because I think, as Jill Lepore pointed out in one of her great books, that's the way that I think liberal leaders and centrist, you know, center-left leaders have been most effective. You know, Martin Luther King being a great example. Cite American foundational policy and connect the vision for progressive change to forming a more perfect union. And I think that's where you build a broad-based coalition. As I said in my announcement video the other day, which I deeply believe, we need to build the broadest possible coalition to defeat Donald Trump, defend our democracy, and win back the House from these MAGA minions who aren't even interested in solving problems anymore. And Nick LaLota is you know, example number one in that. I mean, he's been a Trump flunky from day one in a district that Joe Biden narrowly won. And I think very often New York 1, Suffolk County, gets written off. We're a swing district, and we haven't been viewed that way. And I think that's a huge opportunity, particularly in this election, to really stand up and build a broad coalition and flip this seat, and then do the work to hold it down ballot, to take it and from a swing district to making a separate Suffolk County Democratic Party that is able to win elections in the long run and create a blueprint for how you achieve that change.
Great. Question from the chat. What specific policies would you propose in Congress and support to expand democracy and voting rights?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think we need election reform. Fundamentally, we've got a screwed up incentive structure in our politics that stops people from solving problems. The system frequently ends up corrupting people who go in for good reasons. And I think Nick LaLota is a perfectly good example of that. I don't know, I want to speak to why he entered the system, but I was so offended by the tweet he sent out mocking Oklahoma Senator James Langford for coming up with a bipartisan border security bill. Look, we know that we need comprehensive immigration reform. That's you know, President Biden supported it, President Obama. That's what's necessary to solve this issue in a way that's consistent with our values. Again, grandson of immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. Immigrants make our country better economically, culturally, in every way. But we need to restore the integrity of the system, and then that creates a pathway to citizenship, a pathway for the dreamers to come out of the shadows, and things like, you know, temporary worker visas for agricultural workers, which is so important for farms in Suffolk County and across the country. That's what we need, is a balanced plan. But because because conservatives were holding up Ukraine funding and Israel funding and Taiwan funding, really out of fealty to Donald Trump, who apparently has fealty to Vladimir Putin because he never criticizes him, that Democrats worked with Senator Langford to come up with a bipartisan border security bill. And upon achieving that, Republicans blocked it in the House because they said, you know what, we want to do Donald Trump's bidding. We don't actually want to solve the problem. And I think that gives away the larger game. A lot of folks don't want to solve the problem. They'd rather have the issue to fearmonger and fundraise rather than fix it. And I think that's a firing offense. I think it decreases faith in our democracy. And that's what we need to restore: government, faith in government of and for and by the people. And that means showing people that government can work and can make their lives better. I'll give you a couple other concrete examples. Look, people don't like to face this fact, but Donald Trump and the Republicans raised our taxes. And what's worse, they did it out of spite as part of a political stunt. Right? Reducing the state and local tax deductions was a political stunt. And they're never going to fix it, no matter how much they say they want to, because they're too invested in perpetuating the red state, blue state divide. Democrats can and will, and that'll put money in people's pockets. But not only that, and this is something I'm incredibly passionate about, I think Democrats can go further in that in ways that'll help reduce the cost of living here in Suffolk County and across the country by expanding the child tax credit. We did it during COVID. We cut child poverty in half. We cut child poverty in half. That offers us a real world example of what can happen when government works. And that's real money in the pockets of working families and middle class families who are struggling to pay for childcare, and just to give them a stronger start in life, a greater foundation. Baby bonds are another example of how you can help alleviate those long-term costs. But expanding the child tax credit, that's something that Democrats can do and should do, and I would absolutely champion. And look, I like policy. There's so much we can do. I think the infrastructure funding in the infrastructure bill can be directed in Long Island in ways that can alleviate a lot of transportation concerns. And I'd go moonshot. I think we've been too modest. Frankly, I think we need high-speed rail. Back in the day, Nelson Rockefeller had a vision of high-speed rail from Penn Station to Riverhead. There's a proposal called the North Atlantic Rail Initiative that could connect Penn Station with Ronkonkoma, Stony Brook, go under the bay, and end up getting to Boston in 110 minutes, which would be transformative. And for Stony Brook, and also Brookhaven National Labs, and make that a national innovation center, which it is and which it should be in terms of spinning off new businesses in the district. Digital infrastructure so that people can start new businesses out here. So there's more predictable connectivity as the nature of work has changed. That's a huge opportunity for Suffolk County down the road. And look, bottom line, I think what Democrats have credibility to do and what needs to be done for our country is to rebuild and strengthen the middle class. I think it's not an accident that the middle of our politics have been hollowed out while the middle class has been squeezed on all sides. And that's something that Democrats give a damn about, Republicans pay lip service to, but end up trying to divert that energy towards a policy of resentments and grievances and culture war fights that don't reflect where most people live. And so I think we need to move towards a politics that actually helps unite us, not divide us, and answer people's concerns, particularly the growing gap between the super rich and everybody else, frankly, but particularly the middle class and the working poor. That will help heal our country. It'll help restore faith in the American dream. And I think we need to think in those terms and think about the policies that would achieve those goals. And climate change mitigation, by the way, and defending women's reproductive freedoms, which are clearly undersold, as today's IVF decision in Alabama showed. Which is just the latest insult in the wake of Dobbs, where conservative justices lied to the Senate. They lied to the American people about their intentions. The first chance they got, they threw out 50 years of precedent. And now we see the downstream effect of that, which is simply a sustained assault on reproductive freedom for women, which would never happen if it were men who were at stake. So I think all these things are urgent, and this election offers moral clarity and moral urgency. And there's a lot that Democrats can do if we control the House of Representatives to stop that slide and start bringing this back together again.
We had a question in the chat. What would you do about the Supreme Court's, the current state of the Supreme Court? We have a bunch of questions, so brief answers, please.
Look, I think the way to address the Supreme Court is to make sure that Democrats are controlling the White House, Joe Biden's reelected, and appoint Supreme Court justices who are Democrats. I think, look, one of the one of the greatest insults to our democracy in recent years was the blocking of Merrick Garland after Antonin Scalia died. Allegedly, Republicans said, look, we don't think that this is too important to the court to ever, put someone on the court, even in an open seat during an election year. And then when Justice Ginsburg died, they pushed through Amy Coney Barrett in October. And I understand people's frustrations around that. But the answer to this and so many other problems is to win. It's to win. And one of the core messages of my campaign and what I believe in this race is Democrats can't afford to lose this fight. Democrats can't afford to lose this fight.
So one of the questions, just following up on that in the chat, was what have you done for us question, right? Like, what have you done for the first congressional district? What have you done for Suffolk County? How do you make the case that you're the right person?
Well, look, I'm not a career politician. I've never run for office before. Some of you might be familiar with my work on CNN over the last several years, or appearances on Bill Maher and all that. But what you know, if you've seen my appearances, my reality check segments on CNN, is that I care deeply about pushing back on disinformation with facts. I care about focusing on solutions to problems, not just fixating on problems. And I have been consistently tough on Donald Trump because of the legacy of lies of the divisive politics. And we need to stand up to that, and we need to do that to build the broadest possible coalition. Look, I love Suffolk County. I love our home. And I was actually, just one small local example of something I did in a civic way was to work with Gaughran and really following her lead to help save the Steinbeck House. And you say that's a small thing, and in some respects, maybe it is. But to me, it was a wonderful triumph on a couple levels. First of all, when we read that the Steinbeck House was for sale, obviously there hadn't been any protections in place, and it could have been bulldozed the next day. But instead, a group of local citizens came together, Gaughran being the real leader of it, and me providing, I hope, a great deal of support. And we worked with the elected officials. We worked with CPF funds. We raised funds from private citizens, and the community rallied together, and we saved the Steinbeck House. And now it's a writer's retreat run by the Mitchell Center. And I think one of the things people love about Suffolk County is not just the quality of life, but the character of our communities, the historic character of our communities, and celebrating that and reminding people of the history and heritage of our communities. And when they do that, there's a deeper appreciation about the obligation we all have to protect that unique character and heritage, and to grow in ways that are consistent with that. And so that's a small thing, but it's in some respects, but I think it speaks to what I value. And it's not just as a writer. I've written all my books here, actually save one, 3 of my 4 books and 2 anthologies. And I like writing about American history because I think we can apply American history to a lot of our problems and the lessons of history. And one of those lessons, I'd say, is when we face crisis of confidence in American democracy, we need to face it with optimism and confidence. We need to be happy warriors and not give in to despair and division, which is an easy temptation. And one of the reasons I got in this race, as I wrote in my final essay on CNN, is that there's a feeling of exhaustion right now. I know we can all feel it. We sometimes see it in our family members, particularly younger folks. And they're tuning out politics. They're tuning out politics and civics and news, frankly, because it all seems so overwhelming. But this is precisely the wrong time to do that. This is when we need to lean in. I think there's been a semi-organized effort to make participation in politics seem indecent and ugly and dangerous, and that just seeds the ground to the extremists and the ideologues and the people who want to seize power despite the fact they don't represent a majority of the people. And so that's when I think people need to get involved. They need to get off the sidelines and roll up their sleeves and get in the arena, and that's why I'm running for Congress.
John, I'm just going to hop in right here. And first of all, it was great to be together on the Steinbeck House. But I mean, I think the people here tonight, they're from Long Island, and they don't really know you well, and they want to know what you're going to do for CD1. And there's a number of really good questions in the chat about that. So I'm gonna ask you to maybe give briefer answers. I'm going to lob it back to Julie to maybe get to the questions.
All right, we have a question about taking money from No Labels, which received major funding from Harlan Crow, who's one of those right-wing donors.
Yeah.
We have a question
first of all,
about.
I should clarify.
And we have a question about the environment. Okay.
Sure. And look, I'm very aware that even before I entered this race, Nancy put out a fundraising email the night before the special election in 3, saying I was a shadow candidate for pushed by no labels. And the idea of taking money for no labels, I'm not sure where that came from, but that's just utter nonsense. I strongly condemn, and I've written columns condemning no labels attempt to run a third-party candidate right now. I called it, and you can look it up. It's on my website, johnavlon.com. An extraordinarily reckless gamble with our democracy at this time. I was one of a bunch of Democrats and Republicans in the wake of the Tea Party victory in 2010 who co-founded No Labels because I wanted to create a politics of problem solving where people could speak across the aisle and help create the Problem Solvers Caucus. I think that's healthy. I think that's the way democracy works. We need to reason together. But I haven't had anything to do with No Labels since I became editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast in 2013. That's more than a decade. And I've clearly condemned in writing and on air their attempts to run a third-party candidate. So attempts to connect me to that are desperate and frankly intentional misinformation.
Good to know. Thank you. Catherine has a question about, sea levels rising. What legislation in Congress would you support that addresses the crisis of climate change? And maybe you can target that to the interests of this area in particular.
My God, I mean, this isn't an abstract concern. I mean, any debates about climate change, I mean, we've lost so much ground because of the intentional disinformation spread about climate change, the emergence of doubt. I've done extensive, studies and videos about this at CNN. But let's just talk about how it affects our community. Let's talk about what just happened in Ditch Plains in Montauk, right? The storm surge came in and wiped out houses, and it's become a regular instance. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers just came in the wake of that. A process that was begun, the negotiation for which was begun when Tim Bishop was in Congress. I think Tim Bishop is a model for me and for all of us. I mean, he was on the Transportation Committee subcommittee that deals with water. And that's an issue that just affects our community in every way. I think the infrastructure, the infrastructure bill, but also the Inflation Reduction Act created dollars to help fix this problem. But we need to be honest. We need to have climate change mitigation. There's no easy answer. I think it's great what the Army Corps of Engineers did. We need to reinforce the structure of our communities. One short-term thing we can do, by the way, is make it so that when small businesses and families and homes and communities are trying to reinforce their properties and their communities against climate change, to make the money they invest in that tax deductible. It shouldn't come out of their pockets. So the proper role of government, as Abraham Lincoln said, is to do for people and communities what they can't do so well for themselves. Mitigating climate change is a classic example for that. And I am sick to death of seeing Republicans try to gut the climate change provisions that are impacting our communities. And the environment is the economy in Suffolk County, and the economy is the environment. And you see that in fishing and farming and travel and tourism. And that's the lens we need to see. This false choice between the two. We need to understand they're fundamentally interconnected. But I think there are things members of Congress can do if they're on the right committees to get the funding and to target it to help our community. But we're experiencing the impact of climate change in real time. And it's a perfect example of the proper role of government.
You have 1.5 minutes left.
One and a half minutes.
Okay.
All right, we're going to ask the question we ask everyone. Would you
Yep.
support Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill in the House?
I support a public option. I'm a pro-choice kind of guy on every level, and I support the public option. It's being, we've seen it deployed in Colorado and Washington State and other states, and I think that's a really healthy way to give people the choice to participate in Medicare and government subsidized programs that lower the cost. And I think the Biden administration's done an extraordinary job negotiating, insulin, for example, bring it down to $35. That's the kind of concrete things that Democrats can do that Republicans resist, that make an impact in people's lives. I think you need to work within the culture of our country and the realities of our system. And this is a long process. Think about the drag down fight we've had for the past decade and change over Obamacare. 20,000 attempts to kill it by Republicans. And I don't know if they've finally given up, but now we see it's popular because it works. We've got 40 million people who've got health insurance who didn't before. And I think that's a perfect time to build on that foundation and to add to it a public option. so people can see and feel the impact for themselves. And I think you need to be very careful about not overreaching and creating a political backlash. I mean, I covered some of those rallies in the Tea Party where people were carrying signs saying, government, get your hands off my Medicaid. I just think that the success of Obamacare gives us a foundation to build on, and the right way to build on, I think, is through the public option.
I'm getting the big T from the timekeeper, the big T.
The big T.
The big T. We're out of time. Once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Catherine, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Julie. We appreciate you monitoring the chat. And I'm just going to thank all the candidates for their time tonight, and thank the folks that attended. There were a number of questions in the chat that we didn't get to, and what I will do is kind of synthesize those and get them out to the campaigns, and if they answer them, we'll get them back to those who joined us this evening. So I really want to thank everybody for attending Peer's meeting tonight. What I should do right now is to drop in the chat how you can actually join the organization if you're not already a member. We welcome you to join. There you go, it's in the chat. And please stay, those who are interested, for a conversation now about the materials that we just heard from the 4 different candidates. So thank you to Kyle, thank you to Nancy, thank you to Jim, and thank you to John. We wish you well. We hope it's a good, productive campaign that discusses issues that really impact Long Islanders. I know it's important to run on Trump in one respect, but I think in order to get candidates that are low turnout and maybe not affiliated with any party, you need to encourage them for why they want to vote for you. So they're going to want to hear specific ways that you're going to help, everyday Long Islanders' lives going forward. So with that, let's give a round of applause to the candidates. You can unmute yourselves, and those who want can stay afterwards. Thank you.